In the present atmosphere of acrimony, of violence and contempt, we must thank our King for having the wisdom to call this imbizo. South Africa is seized with a crisis that has the eyes of the world upon us. Under these circumstances, my position is that of presenting His Majesty to you as his subjects. It's a duty which is emotional for me because I performed it even before His Majesty was born, when his late father, my first cousin, was ruling us. Nkosi yakwakhetha. I'm emotional about it, and you pardon me for that, because a lot has been said in the media about me and the King. And I would like to say that, for the sake of young people, it's a duty which my great-grandfather, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, performed when King Cetshwayo, who faced the might of the British, faced the British and led the King's regiments. It's a duty which Mangosuthu Buthelezi performed under the reign of the King's grandfather, King Solomon Dinizulu. It is right that we should hear from our King. We are gathered here in a time of crisis. There is violence sweeping through our communities, targeted at our brothers and sisters from this continent. When we sang the national anthem, Sontonga did not Nkosi Sikelele South Africa, what in Nkosi Sikelele Africa. Our people are attacking the very neighbors who gave us refuge during our own liberation struggle. These are the people with whom we have had trade ties, historical ties, and ties of humanity. There is no sense in what is happening, my fellow Zulus. A spark has been ignited and it has taken flame in terrible proportions. We are ashamed, and we are ashamed. In 1974, our leader, Oliver Tambo, was invited to Addis Ababa, and I was invited at the same time to speak at a seminar during the lifetime of His Imperial Majesty, King Haile Selassie. We were engaged the whole night because the debate was about sanctions against South Africa. And as you know, we had different views on the matter. Mr. Tambo, as our leader and as my senior, suggested that I should go alone to Addis because he said it would not be right for us to disagree on an international platform. He waited for me in Kenya. So we flew together to Lusaka, where I went to see President Kaunda, who was then the head of state, to thank him for giving sanctuary to all our exiles. I proceeded to also to go to Dar es Salaam to see President Nyerere, to thank him for the sanctuary that he gave our exiles. But today, as happens in most times of crisis, apportioning blame seems to have taken precedence over resolving the crisis itself. And from many quarters, the finger of blame has fallen on the utterances of His Majesty, our King. All sorts of accusations have been erroneously leveled at the King on the basis of what is presented in the media as his utterances at Opongolo. The Honorable Minister of Police, the Honorable Nathi Nhleko, who was present when the King spoke, has repudiated these allegations. Our brothers and sisters from African states are welcome in our midst, just as we South Africans, as refugees of apartheid, were welcome in their own countries. His Majesty, we are made to understand, merely stated that criminal elements are not welcome. And all of us don't disagree with that, do we? And I believe our King has been used as an excuse for violent men and criminals to act out of their depravity. Of all that His Majesty said, only a small part is repeatedly quoted. Let me therefore state that the King as far as we understood, spoke about the sacrifices of our forefathers to gain liberation, including the imprisonment of King Cetshwayo in the castle in Cape Town, and King Dinizulu, who was exiled on the island of St. Helena. The king's grandfather and his brother, Mshenga Dinizulu, were born on the island of St. Helena. Considering all that they gave to secure an inheritance of freedom in this generation, His Majesty, our King, lamented the character of our generation. He said, and I quote him verbatim, "In 2015, South Africans are people who don't want to work, who are thieves, who rape children, housebreakers, lazy people, who don't want to work the land. They are people who, if other nations look at them, will say, oh, let's go and eat the inheritance of these stupid people," unquote. When our king then said that it's time for us to ask them to leave, he meant it is time for South Africans to start respecting the inheritance we have received from those who struggled for freedom. It is time for South Africans to accept hard work, the rule of law, and respect for human life. In fact, His Excellency, our President, echoed these words when he addressed Salga. Exactly the same word, that we must get rid of this culture of entitlement. It is time for South Africans to accept hard work. It is entirely irrational that our people's response to this call would be to trample the rule of law and discard the right to life and human dignity to our brothers and sisters. Nonetheless, xenophobia is present within South Africa, and it takes very little to spark violence against foreign nationals. This is shameful to us all, but it is the truth. We must acknowledge it if we are going to arrest the violence and begin to change this reality. We, as Amakosan leaders in our nation, have an undeniable responsibility to stop the violence, as Nkosi Mdunga has just said. Regardless of why it started or what sparked the flame this time, it is our responsibility to put out the fire. We need to send a clear and unambiguous message to our people. They must know where we stand and what we expect them to do. Our message must be unanimous. The fact is, chasing out other nations will not solve our problems, because they are our own problems. They are rooted in our own hearts. St. Peter could well have been describing South Africa when in his gospel he wrote in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 13, quote, that they will promise them freedom while they themselves are slaves to depravity, unquote. Other nations want to come to South Africa because South Africa promises freedom. But our people, as His Majesty described, are depraved in many ways. Violence lies just below the surface. Entitlement, anger, and lawlessness have corrupted the souls of our people. Thus, we are faced with a threefold crisis. The first and most pressing is to put a stop to violent attacks and intimidation against foreign nationals. The second is to find a way to remove the evil from the heart of our people and restore Ubuntu Butu. The third one is damage control. In the eyes of the world, the image of the Zulu nation and the Zulu monarch has been damaged. It is necessary to set this right. This may demand a difficult action on the part of our king, but we know that leadership demands sacrifices, and our kings over many generations have never shied away from sacrificing for the name, reputation, and unity of their nation. What we cannot do is remain silent and allow the damaged image of our king to open the way to public denigration of the Zulu monarch by those whose animosity is usually restrained despite ever being present. We're already seeing this public denigration everywhere. I'm astounded by what has been said about our king in the media. No one would have dared say these things before. An editorial comment in the Mercury of Friday went so far as to call his message, quote, a paid agent of ethnic mobilization, unquote. In yesterday's City Press, Mr. Mondi Makanya again vented his spleen by saying that the king allows himself to be used as a political tool. This is a repugnant accusation that denigrates our monarch in the extreme. He accuses me, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, of using the king to build my political prestige. Did my father Matole serve King Solomon Gatinzulu to promote his political prestige? Did my great-grandfather Nyamana Buthelezi serve King Tejoyo to promote his political prestige? I've never carved out a position for myself, as Makanya claims, by using the king. Is he so ignorant about our nation? No, it is not ignorance that drives these attacks, but vitriol and contempt. The king is the son of my first cousin, His Majesty King Cyprian Beguzulu, Nyangazizwe Solomon Gatinzulu. King Solomon was the full brother of my mother, Princess Makoko Mantiti Ngangezinye Sibilile Gatinzulu. The king and I are family. The tide of public support from outside the Zulu nation has momentarily turned against our king. Our opponents will use this opportunity to vent their spleen against us. Those who oppose the institution of the monarchy and the institution of traditional leadership will attack us now, as they are doing. We need to undo the damage as swiftly as possible and close this gap in the wall. Regardless of how one interprets what His Majesty said, one thing is very clear. He never decreed violence, mayhem, looting, murder, or arson. Our king would by no means, by retracing his words, to stand before our nation and order that violence stop, indeed. That is eminently necessary, for our king carries more authority in his person than any one of us. Ultimately, only moral leadership will heal the damage that has been done. This will be the first step in addressing two parts of our current crisis: damage control and arresting the violence. This third part, that of restoring Ubuntu in our nation, will take much longer and must be a sustained vocation amongst Amakosi for years. A first step, I believe, at this crucial point, would be to encourage those among our people who still have goodwill to join hands and collectively reach out to foreign nationals in our midst, offering assistance and support. Our nation needs to be seen cleaning up this mess. We need to be seen restoring order, as our Premier has just said, making amends and seeking forgiveness. This may well be the medicine of the soul that our people need just now. We will rely on the wisdom of our King. Ngakho kufanele silalele ongangezwe